The data files on humans were 300 pages long, and Rin had read every single one of them twice. She was a Sylvani intelligence analyst, trained to study species and predict their behavior. She had documented wars between empires that spanned entire galaxies. She had watched civilizations rise and fall from her observation posts. Nothing surprised her anymore, or so she thought. Her new assignment had brought her to an orbital station above a small world called Harvest 3. The planet was nothing special. It had water, breathable air, and enough farmland to feed a mid-sized colony. 2 species had claimed it. The Dramath Collective wanted its mineral deposits. The humans wanted to grow food there. Ren pulled up the latest scans of the human settlement. 3,000 civilians lived in a cluster of simple buildings near a river. They had farms, a school, a medical center, and a small landing area for supply ships. Their military presence was almost laughable. Fewer than 200 soldiers protected the entire colony. She made a note in her report. Humans continue to establish settlements with minimal defensive capability. Either they are foolish, or they believe no one will attack them. The Dramath had proven that belief wrong. Their armada had arrived 6 hours ago. 40 warships hung in orbit like hungry predators. 40,000 Dramath warriors waited in drop pods, ready to claim Harvest 3 for their collective. The math was simple. The humans were outnumbered 200 to 1. Ren expected the humans to evacuate. Any logical species would flee when faced with such odds. She had seen it countless times before. Survival was the first law of the universe. Everything else came second, but the humans did not evacuate. Instead, they sent a message. Ren played the recording again, studying the face of the human who had transmitted it. She was an older woman with gray hair and tired eyes. Her name was Rosa, and she led the colony. "This is Rosa Martinez of Harvest 3, the woman said. Her voice was calm and steady. "We have received your demand to vacate this world. We decline. These people are under our protection. We will not leave them. We will not abandon this place. If you land your forces, we will resist. That is all." Ren paused the recording and stared at the frozen image. The woman showed no fear, no panic. She spoke as if she were declining an invitation to dinner rather than facing an army that could crush her colony in hours. This is irrational, Ren thought. This is suicide. She switched her screens to show the Dramath response. Their commander, a massive creature covered in armored scales, had laughed at the human message. He called it the desperate bluff of a dying species. He ordered his troops to prepare for landing. Ren watched the drop pods fall toward the planet's surface like metal rain. Thousands of them streaked through the atmosphere, carrying warriors bred for conquest. The Dramath were not known for mercy. They would take what they wanted and kill anyone who stood in their way. She turned her sensors toward the human settlement and waited for the inevitable. The first Dramath forces landed 3 kilometers from the colony. They formed into assault columns and began marching toward the human buildings. Their commanders expected resistance at the perimeter. They expected humans to meet them with weapons and defenses, but no one was there. The humans had simply vanished. Ren checked her scans again. The settlement was empty. The farms were abandoned. Even the livestock had been moved. 3,000 people had disappeared in the hours before the landing, and she had no idea where they had gone. The Dramath pushed forward, confused but confident. Their scouts reported no contact with enemy forces. Their sensors found nothing. It was as if the humans had simply given up and fled into the wilderness to die. Then the first patrol went silent. Ren watched the tactical display as 12 Dramath warriors stopped transmitting. One moment they were moving through a forest. The next moment they were gone. No distress call, no weapon discharge. Just silence that a second patrol vanished near a river crossing. A third disappeared in a rocky canyon. Within 2 hours, the Dramath had lost over 100 warriors without ever seeing their enemy. The Dramath commander screamed orders at his officers. He demanded answers. He threatened executions for failure. But his army was fighting shadows. Ren leaned closer to her screens, her heart's beating faster. She had studied human military history. She knew about their wars on Earth. But reading about something and watching it happen were very different things. The humans were not running. They were not hiding. They were hunting. She opened a new file and began typing. Initial assessment requires revision. Humans have not surrendered or evacuated. They have dispersed their civilians to unknown locations and initiated guerrilla resistance against superior forces. Their tactics are, she paused, searching for the right word. Unexpected. Below her, on the surface of Harvest 3, the night was just beginning. And somewhere in that darkness, fewer than 200 humans were preparing to fight 40,000 enemies. Ren saved her report and settled in to watch. She had a feeling this battle would be unlike anything she had ever documented before. She was right. 12 hours into the battle, Ren stopped counting the Dramath dead. Her screen showed chaos across the entire combat zone. Dramath patrols stumbled through forests and crossed rivers, searching for an enemy they could not find. Every time they spotted humans, the humans melted away into the terrain. Every time they pushed toward the empty settlement, they walked into traps. The humans fought like ghosts. Ren had seen guerrilla warfare before. Many species used it when facing stronger enemies. But she had never seen it done like this. The humans did not just hide and ambush. They played with the Dramath minds. They left signs and messages. They made noise in one direction and attacked from another. They turned the entire planet into a maze of fear that a Dramath commander led 300 warriors toward a narrow bridge over a deep canyon. Intelligence said the human civilians were hiding in caves on the other side. If they could cross the bridge, they could end this war quickly. Ren watched the formation approach. Then she saw movement on the bridge itself. One human soldier stood at the center of the crossing. Just one. She wore battered armor and carried a rifle that looked too big for her body. Her helmet was cracked, and blood ran down her face from a wound on her forehead. The Dramath commander halted his troops. He studied the lone human through his optical enhancers. Then he laughed. "One defender," he called out. "You send one soldier to stop 300 warriors." The human woman raised her rifle. "One is enough." Ren pulled up the human's identification from intercepted communications. Her name was Dara. She was a sergeant. She was 29 years old. She had a sister on Earth and a cat named Boots. Why do I know about her cat? Ren wondered. Why does that detail exist in military communications? The Dramath charged. Dara opened fire. She did not aim for the front ranks. She aimed for the supports holding the bridge to the canyon walls. Her rifle punched holes through metal and stone. The bridge groaned and shook. The Dramath realized what she was doing and tried to retreat. But 300 warriors could not turn around on a narrow bridge. They crashed into each other. They shoved and pushed and screamed. Dara kept firing. The bridge collapsed. 200 Dramath fell into the canyon. Their screams echoed off the rocks until the sound of impact silenced them forever. The survivors scrambled back to solid ground, their assault broken. Dara stood on the far side of the gap she had created. The bridge was gone. The crossing was destroyed. She had given her people time. Ren expected the human to flee now. Her mission was complete. The civilians could escape deeper into the caves while the Dramath found another route. Logic demanded retreat, but Dara did not retreat. She sat down on a rock, reloaded her rifle, and waited. The Dramath brought up long-range weapons. They did not need to cross the canyon to kill one wounded human. They could simply shoot her from where they stood. Dara knew this. Ren could see it in the way she positioned herself. The human had chosen to stay visible. She was making herself a target on purpose. Why? Ren thought. What possible reason could she have? Then she heard the radio transmission. "Dara, get out of there," a male voice shouted. "We've got the civilians moving. You did your job. Fall back." Dara laughed. The sound was strange and warm and completely wrong for the situation. "Can't do that, Ori. They'll follow me to the secondary tunnels. Better if I keep them busy here." "Dara, please, tell my sister I was brave, okay? And feed Boots. He likes the expensive food. Don't let him get fat." She was joking. Ren stared at her screens in disbelief. The human was about to die, and she was making jokes about her cat. The Dramath fired. Dara was fast. She rolled behind the rock and returned fire. Her shots were precise and deadly. Every bolt found a target. But she was one soldier against an army, and the army had heavy weapons. The battle lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, Dara was dead. Her body lay on the rocks near the destroyed bridge. Her rifle was empty. Her armor was burned through in a dozen places, but the Dramath had stopped advancing. They had lost too many warriors at the bridge. They needed to regroup and find another path. By the time they did, The civilians would be gone. One human had held a bridge against 300 enemies. One human had died laughing and asking someone to feed her cat. Ren saved the recording and added it to her report. Then she sat in silence for a long time. She had documented 10,000 battles. She had watched warriors die for territory, for resources, for pride, for revenge. She understood those motivations. They made sense, but she had never seen anyone die for a cat. She had never seen anyone die while laughing. The humans were not behaving like any species she had ever studied. They fought without hope of victory. They sacrificed themselves without hesitation. They joked in the face of death as if dying were just another task to complete before moving on. Ren began to feel something she had not felt in decades of intelligence work. She began to feel afraid, not of the humans themselves, not of their weapons or their tactics. She was afraid of what they believed. She was afraid of whatever force drove them to stand alone on bridges and laugh while the universe tried to kill them. That kind of belief could not be defeated. That kind of belief could only be destroyed completely or not at all. And the Dramath, Ren realized, had no idea what they were fighting. The battle entered its second day, and Ren made a decision that violated every rule of her profession. She contacted the humans directly. Intelligence analysts were supposed to observe. They were supposed to remain invisible and neutral. They were absolutely not supposed to open communication channels with the species they studied. But Ren needed to understand what she was watching. She needed answers that her data files could not provide. She found a frequency the humans were using for medical coordination. A tired voice answered her hail. Unknown station, this is Harvest 3 Medical Unit. If you're Dramath, we're a little busy. If you're anyone else, we're still busy. What do you want? I am Ren, she said. Sylvani, intelligence analyst. I am observing this battle for the Galactic Council. I wish to ask questions. There was a long pause. Then the voice returned, sounding curious rather than hostile. Questions? About what? About why you are still fighting. Another pause. Hold on. Let me get somewhere quieter. Ren waited. A few minutes later, a new video feed appeared on her screen. She saw a human male in blood-stained medical clothing. He looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded his eyes, and his hands were still wet from whatever surgery he had just completed. I'm Ori, he said. Field medic. You want to know why we're fighting? Yes. Your situation is hopeless. The Dramath have overwhelming numbers. Your casualties are mounting. Logic dictates surrender or retreat. Yet you continue to resist. I do not understand. Ori laughed softly. It was a tired sound, but not bitter. Lady, I'm not sure I understand it either. But I'll try to explain. He sat down on a supply crate and rubbed his face with his hands. Behind him, Ren could see wounded humans lying on makeshift beds. Other medics moved between them, treating injuries with whatever supplies they had left. See those people? Ori said, pointing over his shoulder. Most of them aren't soldiers. They're farmers, teachers, parents. They picked up weapons because someone told them their families were in danger. Nobody ordered them to fight. They just did it. But why? Ren pressed. Self-sacrifice makes evolutionary sense only when protecting genetic relatives. Your species cannot all be related. We're not related by blood. Ori agreed. We're related by choice. Ren's translator struggled with the concept. I do not understand. Ori leaned forward. Humans bond with things. People, animals, places, ideas. Once we bond with something, it becomes ours. Not property. Family. And humans will do anything to protect family. Even die. Especially die. Ori's eyes were very serious now. Dying for strangers sounds crazy, right? But they're not strangers to us. The moment we decided to protect them, they became ours. Our people. Our responsibility. Ren thought about the sergeant who died at the bridge. Dara had never met most of the civilians she saved. She had no genetic connection to them. Yet she had given her life without hesitation. This is irrational, Ren said carefully. Completely, Ori agreed. Humans aren't rational. We're emotional. We make decisions based on feelings as much as facts. And right now, every human on this planet feels the same thing. What do they feel? They feel like those caves are full of their brothers and sisters and children. They feel like running away would be worse than dying. They feel like some things matter more than survival. Ori shrugged. I can't explain it better than that. Ren was silent for a moment. Then she asked the question that had haunted her since watching Dara die. The sergeant at the bridge. Dara. She was laughing at the end, joking about her cat. How could she be happy while dying? Ori's expression softened. Dara wasn't happy. She was scared out of her mind. But she made a choice. She decided her death would mean something. And once she made that choice, the fear didn't matter anymore. I do not understand, Ren admitted. Neither do I, honestly. But I've seen it happen. Humans facing death find a kind of peace when they know their sacrifice will save others. It's like the fear transforms into something else. Something stronger. Behind Ori, an alarm began beeping. He glanced over his shoulder and sighed. I have to go. More wounded coming in. He looked back at the camera. Lady, I don't know why you're watching us. I don't know what your report will say. But I hope you understand one thing. What is that? We're not heroes. We're not special. We're just people who found something worth dying for. Every human you see fighting down here made the same choice. They decided that protecting their people mattered more than going home. He stood up and began walking toward the medical bay. I have a daughter on Earth. She's 7 years old. I want her to grow up in a galaxy where humans are known for keeping their word. Where people know that if humanity says they'll protect you, they mean it. And if you die here, Ori smiled sadly, then my daughter will know her father died trying to be that kind of human. And maybe she'll grow up to be even better. The feed cut out. Ren sat alone in her observation post, surrounded by data and screens and recordings. She had enough information to write 100 reports. She had tactical analyses and casualty figures and strategic assessments, but none of it explained what she had just heard. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not calculate odds or measure costs. They fought with something deeper and stranger and more terrifying than logic. They fought with love, and love, Ren was beginning to understand, made them capable of things that defied every rule of war she had ever learned. 3 days. The battle had lasted 3 days, and somehow the humans were still fighting. Ren had stopped sleeping. She could not look away from her screens. Every hour brought new horrors and new miracles. The Drameth threw wave after wave at the human positions. The humans broke, reformed, retreated, and counterattacked. They held lines that should have collapsed. They defended positions that should have been overrun. The numbers told a story of impossible resistance. The Drameth had lost over 20,000 warriors. 60% of their invasion force was dead or wounded. Their commanders screamed accusations at each other. Their morale was crumbling. But the humans had paid their own price. Only 47 soldiers remained. 47 humans against the thousands of Drameth who still had the strength to fight. The defenders had pulled back to a narrow canyon that led to the cave system where the civilians hid. It was their last line. If it fell, everyone would die. Ren watched the humans preparing their final defense. They built walls from rocks and debris. They dug trenches with their hands. They set up their remaining weapons in positions that covered every approach, and they laughed. They joked. They told stories and shared food and acted like they were preparing for a camping trip instead of a last stand. One soldier caught her attention. He was young. Too young, Ren thought. His name was Pell, and her record showed he had only finished his military training 6 months ago. He should have been doing simple guard duty somewhere safe. Instead, he was here, at the end of everything. Pell volunteered for ammunition runs. The forward positions needed supplies. The soldiers there were running low on everything. Someone had to carry crates from the supply cave to the defensive line. The path crossed 200 meters of open ground under constant Drameth fire. Pell made the first run. Ren watched him sprint across the rocks, a heavy crate on his back. Energy bolts struck the ground around him. One grazed his leg. He stumbled but kept running. He reached the forward position, dropped his load, and ran back. Then he did it again. And again. On his third run, a bolt hit him in the shoulder. He fell, rolled, and somehow got back to his feet. He was bleeding badly. His left arm hung useless at his side. But he picked up the crate with his good arm and kept moving. He made it to the forward position. He collapsed against a rock wall, breathing hard, blood pooling beneath him. A female soldier ran to him. She pressed bandages against his wounds and shouted for a medic. Pell looked up at her and said something that made her laugh even as tears ran down her face. Ren could not hear what he said, but she saw him reach up with his working hand and pat the woman on the cheek. A gentle gesture, a human gesture. Then he closed his eyes. He was not dead. Ren checked his vital signs through the medical monitors the humans wore. He was unconscious from blood loss. But he had completed his mission. The forward positions had ammunition. The line would hold a little longer. Ren saved the recording and sat back in her chair. Her hands were shaking. When her hands started shaking, she opened a communication channel to the Galactic Council. Her supervisor appeared on screen, looking bored and impatient. Analyst Ren, your report is overdue. I am aware, Ren said. I am requesting immediate council intervention on Harvest 3. Her supervisor blinked. Intervention? For what purpose? To save the humans. The humans? The supervisor laughed. Analyst, the humans are a minor species with no strategic value. They chose to fight a war they cannot win. The council does not interfere in such matters. You do not understand, Ren said. Her voice was louder than she intended. I have watched these humans for 3 days. They are not fighting for territory. They are not fighting for resources. They are fighting because they promised to protect people, and they would rather die than break that promise. Sentimentality, the supervisor dismissed. Your job is to observe and report, not to advocate for doomed species. My job is to understand threats to galactic stability. And I am telling you now that if you let these humans die, every other human in the galaxy will remember. They will remember that the council watched and did nothing. They will remember that their people died alone. The supervisor looked uncomfortable. What are you suggesting? Ren leaned forward. I am suggesting that humans do not forget. I am suggesting that a species willing to die for strangers will be willing to do much worse for revenge. I am suggesting that making enemies of humanity is the most dangerous thing the council could do. You are emotional, analyst. That is unusual for a Sylvani. I am terrified, Ren admitted. Not of these humans. Not of their weapons or their tactics. I am terrified of what they believe. I am terrified of what happens if we let that belief be destroyed here. The supervisor was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. The council will not intervene. Your concerns are noted. Continue your observation. The channel closed. Ren stared at the blank screen. She had tried. She had failed. The humans would die, and the galaxy would lose something precious. Something it did not even know it needed. She turned back to her observation feeds. The sun was setting on Harvest 3. The humans were singing. Their voices echoed through the canyon, rough and tired and beautiful. They were singing about a home most of them would never see again. And Ren, alone in her station, began to weep. Dawn on the 4th day brought death to the canyon. The Drameth had gathered their remaining forces for one final assault. 15,000 warriors formed into columns and began their march toward the human line. Their commanders had learned from their losses. They brought heavy armor. They brought air support. They brought enough firepower to crack the planet in half. The 47 humans watched them come. Ren watched too, her heart's heavy with grief. She had tried to save them. She had failed. All she could do now was record their end and make sure the galaxy knew what had happened here. Then her sensors detected something strange. Ships were entering the system. Dozens of them. They appeared at the edge of scanner range and accelerated toward Harvest 3 with engines burning at maximum. Ren checked the vessel signatures. They were not military ships. They were freighters, passenger transports, cargo haulers, and converted mining vessels. Civilian ships. Human civilian ships. Her communication arrays lit up with hundreds of overlapping transmissions. Harvest 3, this is the freighter Lucky Strike. We heard you needed help. Coming in hot. Colony ship Bright Future responding to distress call. We have 300 volunteers armed and ready. This is Captain Webb of the transport New Horizon. My passengers voted to join the fight. Where do you need us? Ren stared at her screens in disbelief. The ships were not from any military organization. They were not sent by any government. They were ordinary humans from across the sector who had heard about the siege and chosen to come. Chosen to die, more likely. What could civilian ships do against the Drameth Armada? The Drameth thought the same thing. Their orbital vessels moved to intercept the human fleet. They opened fire with weapons designed to destroy warships. Energy beams cut through space. The humans did not slow down. The first freighter took a direct hit and broke apart. Escape pods launched from its burning hull. The other ships kept coming. They weaved and dodged and pushed their engines beyond safe limits. Some were destroyed. Most made it through. They crashed through the Drameth orbital blockade and dove toward the planet's surface. The landings were brutal. Ships came down hard on fields and hillsides, throwing up clouds of dirt and debris. Hatches opened before the dust settled. Humans poured out, carrying weapons they had brought from home. Ren saw farmers with hunting rifles, teachers with pistols, doctors with medical kits, and the determination to use everything inside them. Old humans and young humans, men and women and everyone in between, they were not soldiers. They were people. They ran toward the sound of battle. The Drameth commander watched the reinforcements arrive and demanded an explanation from his intelligence officers. Who were these humans? Where had they come from? Why would civilians throw themselves into a war that was not theirs? A human captain answered the question for him. Her ship had been shot down near the Drameth command position. She climbed out of the wreckage, bleeding and burned, and walked toward the enemy lines with her hands empty and her head held high. "You want to know why we came?" she shouted. Her voice carried across the battlefield. "Because they're ours. Those people in those caves are ours. The soldiers dying in that canyon are ours. Every human who said they would protect this world is ours. And humans do not abandon their own." The Drameth commander studied her. "They are strangers to you. You have never met them. Why would you die for strangers?" The captain smiled. It was a fierce, wild smile that held no fear. "They stopped being strangers the moment they needed help. That's how humans work. We see someone in trouble, and they become family. We feel their pain. We share their fight. And we stand with them until the end. That is madness. Maybe." The captain straightened her shoulders. "But it's our madness. And you are about to learn what it means." Behind her, the reinforced human line launched a counterattack. They came out of the canyon like a wave. Soldiers and civilians fought side by side. Professional warriors and farmers with no training charged the same enemy. They screamed battle cries in a dozen languages. They fired weapons they barely knew how to use, and they pushed the Drameth back. Ren watched the tactical display shift. Lines that had been static for days began to move. The humans advanced meter by meter, paying for every step with blood. But they kept advancing. The Drameth broke, not all at once, not everywhere. But the cracks appeared. Warriors who had fought for 3 days without rest saw thousands of fresh enemies pouring toward them. They saw humans who had crossed the stars to join this fight. They saw a species that refused to surrender no matter the cost. And for the first time, the Drameth felt fear. Ren leaned back in her chair, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The humans had been dying. They had been hours from defeat. And then ordinary people had crossed the galaxy to save them. Not for money. Not for glory. Not for strategy. Just because other humans needed help. She finally understood what the medic had told her. Humans bonded with things. Once they bonded, those things became family. And humans would walk through fire for family. The entire species was one enormous family that most of them had never met. That, Ren realized, was the most terrifying thing she had ever learned. The Drameth retreated on the 5th day. Their armada limped away from Harvest 3 with less than a quarter of its original strength. Their commanders blamed each other for the disaster. Their warriors told stories of the humans who would not die, who kept coming no matter how many fell, who fought like demons from the old legends. Ren watched them go. Then she turned her sensors back to the planet's surface. The humans were gathering their dead. They carried bodies from the battlefield with gentle hands. They laid them in rows on a hillside overlooking the valley where the hardest fighting had taken place. Someone had planted flags, one for each fallen defender. The flags snapped in the morning breeze. Ren requested permission to land. She did not expect the humans to grant it. She was an observer, an outsider, someone who had watched their people die without lifting a finger to help. But they said yes. Her shuttle touched down near the memorial site. She stepped out onto soil still scarred by weapons fire. The air smelled of smoke and blood and something else. Something she could not name. Rosa was waiting for her. The colony leader looked older than she had in the recordings. New lines marked her face. Her eyes held a weight that had not been there before. "You're the analyst," Rosa said. "The one who watched." "Yes." Ren could not meet her eyes. "I tried to convince the council to intervene. They refused." "I know. We intercepted your transmission." Rosa's voice was flat. "You argued for us." "I failed. You tried. That matters." Rosa turned and began walking toward the memorial. "Come. You should see this." Ren followed her up the hillside. Humans stood in clusters among the flags, speaking softly. Some wept. Some stood in silence. A few managed to smile as they shared memories of the dead. Dara held the bridge, someone was saying. Bought us 3 hours. 3 hours for just one person. She was amazing. Pell ran ammunition until he dropped. Kid had more courage than anyone I ever met. Cass flew her shuttle into their command ship. She was singing the whole way down. I heard it on the radio. Ren listened to the stories. Each flag represented a person. Each person had a story. They had been alive, and then they had chosen to die so others could live. She stopped in front of one flag. The name on it was familiar. Dara, the sergeant who had held the bridge. I watched her die, Ren said quietly. She was laughing. Rosa nodded. That sounds like Dara. She always laughed when she was scared. Said it helped her remember that fear was just a feeling, not a fact. She talked about her cat. In her final moments, she talked about feeding her cat. Boots. Rosa smiled sadly. Her sister is taking care of him. Dara made us promise. She paused. Would you like to know why she did that? Why she mentioned something so small when she was about to die? Please. Because it wasn't small to her. Her cat was part of her life. Her sister was part of her life. By mentioning them, she was reminding herself what she was dying for. Not the big things. The small ones. The everyday moments that make life worth living. Ren was silent for a long time. Finally, she asked the question that had driven her to this planet. How do you do it? How do you find the strength to sacrifice everything for people you have never met? Rosa looked out over the memorial at the flags waving in the wind. We don't find it. We build it. Every human you see here made a choice. They chose to believe that some things matter more than survival. They chose to love people they had never met. And once you make that choice, the strength comes naturally, even when it costs your life. Especially then. Rosa turned to face her. Analyst, I know you studied us. I know you read our files and analyzed our behavior. But data cannot capture what makes us human. We are not the sum of our biology or our technology. We are the sum of our choices. She gestured at the flags. Every person here chose to stand between danger and the innocent. They chose to die so others could live. That choice is what defines us. That choice is why we will always be feared. Not for your weapons. Weapons can be matched. Technology can be copied. But the willingness to die for strangers. Rosa shook her head. That cannot be replicated. That cannot be defeated. You can kill humans, but you cannot kill what we believe. Ren walked among the flags for another hour. She read names and listened to stories. She watched humans comfort each other and promised to remember those who had fallen. Then she returned to her shuttle and began writing her final report. She documented everything. The battles, the tactics, the casualties, the guerrilla warfare, and the final stand. The civilian fleet that crossed the stars to save strangers. But at the end, she added a personal observation. It was unprofessional. It was emotional. Her supervisors would probably delete it. She wrote it anyway. I watched humans battle for 5 days. I watched them die in ways that defied reason. I watched ordinary people become heroes because they decided to care about strangers. I have documented 10,000 wars across 300 species. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed the death of worlds. But I have never feared any species the way I now fear humanity. Not because of what they can destroy, because of what they will sacrifice. They love easily, freely, without logic or limit. They adopt strangers as family. They die for people they have never met. They face impossible odds with laughter and songs and jokes about feeding their cats. That is what terrifies me. A species that does not fear death cannot be conquered. A species that fights for love cannot be broken. Humanity is not dangerous because of their weapons. They are dangerous because they mean every word they say, and they will never, ever stop. Ren saved the file and looked out her window at the planet below. The memorial flags were still visible, tiny points of color on a hillside. She would carry those colors with her for the rest of her life, and she would never forget what she had learned on Harvest 3.